I started getting this feeling of something wasn't right. It just didn't, the woods just, it didn't feel right that day. And I kept getting something kind of repeating in my mind, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be here. So I get to the peak of the mountain and I had stopped for a minute just to try to take it all in. And the first thing I noticed was just how quiet it was. It was incredibly, just dead silent. And it creeped me out even more. I'd say maybe 20 yards off to my left where the tree line was, I heard some knocks. It sounded like I should have been just inside the tree line, like I should have seen whatever was knocking, but I didn't see anything. This feeling is still kind of lingering that something doesn't seem right. Another round of those knocks hit. It hit me a little bit harder. It made me really kind of think like something's not right here. Something's going on. I don't understand this, but something's just not right here. All of a sudden, something started running just inside the tree line. I'd say maybe 5 feet, if I'm guessing, inside the tree line. And I watched it run 25, 30 yards or so, and then down the mountain. It was definitely upright. It was running so fast that I couldn't see any details. I didn't see any fingers or a face or nose. It was super fast. This thing had to have been running, again, it's hard to guess, but I'm going to guess 30 miles an hour all day. There's no way it was a human doing that. That was probably the thing that scared me the absolute most, was the speed of it.
I'd like to welcome Ryan to the show. Ryan, welcome to Bigfoot Crossroads, man. How's it going?
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't mind, just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm 40 years old. I'm from upstate New York. A wife and a kid. I work at a community college. And, I guess that's the easiest, simple version of me.
So you reached out to me, not trying to come on the show or anything like that, but just looking to see if I knew anybody in your area that goes out looking for Bigfoot.
Yes.
And, after we got to talking a little bit, you kind of told me your story, and of course I wanted to have you on. I think
sure.
I think it's a really good encounter. Was Bigfoot something that was even on your radar before this happened?
Yes and no. I had an interest in it. I watched Finding Bigfoot, and I'd always kind of felt like it was very possible that it was real, but it wasn't something I was out searching for or really, 100% believed in. But yeah, I had a slight interest in it, I guess.
Well, if you don't mind, just kind of, walk us through that day and tell me what happened.
Sure. This was in May of 2018. It was late May. I guess I should say I'm an endurance athlete, so I was a big runner. And then I got into triathlon for about 8 years. And then I turned to ultra marathons. And for anybody not familiar with that, it's technically anything defined it's defined anything longer than a marathon. So 26.3 miles and longer would technically be an ultra marathon, but they're typically 30, 50, 60, 100-mile races, and they're typically trail races. And I was specifically training for a 50-mile race, the same race all 3 years. So as you can imagine, I spent a lot of time in the woods by myself running on trails. It's very difficult to get anybody to run with you that far. Not that I would do that in training, but just to get those longer days in, it would be very difficult to get anybody. So I spent a lot of time by myself in the woods. At the time, my girlfriend was living in Albany, and because of the nature of my job, I have a lot of free time in the summertime. So I would often take a week, maybe 2 weeks sometimes, and head up to Albany and just kind of live with her for the week. And she would have work during the day, of course, and I wouldn't have anything to do. So I could drive about 45 minutes north or south, and I could either be in the Lake George Adirondack area, or I could be down in the Catskills. And so I would oftentimes just flip a coin, randomly choose which way I wanted to go, and head down to one of the mountains or up to one of the mountains and do some training for the day. So this day I decided to drive down to Hunter Mountain down in the Catskill Mountains. and there's two trails basically to the peak of that mountain, and one is very touristy, and I chose the opposite one. It was the backside of the mountain, which was shorter but a lot steeper, which is not really relevant to the story. But anyways, I chose the backside, and so I started my day. I drove down there. This would have been early in the morning, so I got to the parking lot probably 9:30 in the morning. There was only one other car there, and I started heading up the mountain. And I'd gotten about 3/4 of the way up the mountain, and I saw a guy coming down with his dog. He was coming down the mountain, and he was a younger guy, I don't know, maybe college age. And we passed each other, and I said hello, and he just kind of nodded, and I went on my way, and he went on his way. And it was about, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes after that, I started getting this, well, I guess now I'm learning it's a typical feeling amongst these encounters, but at the time I had no idea. I started getting this feeling of, everyone always calls it dread. I don't know if that's the most accurate word, but we'll just call it dread, I guess. Just a feeling of something wasn't right. It just didn't, the woods just, it didn't feel right that day. And I kept getting something kind of repeating in my mind, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be here. But I'm an idiot and I'm stubborn. So, and I had driven all that way just to get some training in. So I wasn't going to turn around and go home. So I kept going anyways. And that feeling continued on. I had maybe another 1/4 mile to the peak of the mountain. And I get to the peak of the mountain and I stopped, and I was using an app called All Trails that day. I'm sure probably most people are familiar with that. And that trail, went straight up, and then at the peak, it just came to a T. And the idea was I was going to take a right at the T. And then there was a little ridge trail that went maybe another 1/4, half mile. And then it came to a big open area where there was a little ranger cabin and a fire tower. And I planned on going up to the fire tower, heading to the top, take some pictures, whatever. So I get to the peak of the mountain, and I had stopped for a minute, just to try to take it all in. And the first thing I noticed was this is very typical, I'm learning again, but just how quiet it was. It was incredibly, just dead silent. I couldn't hear anything. You couldn't hear the wind. You couldn't hear the normal chipmunks, and anybody that knows anything about the trails in the Northeast and probably everywhere, but you never don't hear chipmunks. You're always going to hear at least that, squirrels, whatever. Well, I didn't hear anything, and it creeped me out even more. But again, I didn't have any reference or knowledge of anything Bigfoot related, or that this would be something to do with that, or really anything. I just kind of kept feeling something was wrong, but I really couldn't pinpoint it. And whatever, I was there doing it, so I just kept going. So I take a right on that T trail, if you will, and I'm going down another 1/4, half mile, whatever, and I get to that opening area, take another right to the opening area. So now I'm 2 rights in, so it's 3 sides to a square basically. And I didn't know until I'd gotten there that there was that cabin, that ranger cabin there. So I saw on the outside of the cabin that there was a map, and I was like, you know what, this would be a great opportunity to look at the map and compare it to the All Trails app that I was using, and just kind of make sure the map that I'm using is 100% accurate and correct, just so I don't get lost that day. So I'm standing there and I'm comparing the map on my phone to the map that's on the wall. And off to my left, I'm not great with distances, if I'm being honest, but I'd say maybe 20 yards, 25 yards, something like that. Off to my left, where the tree line was, I heard some knocks, which of course now I know is 3 knocks, but I obviously didn't know then. But they were very loud. It wasn't something that was off in the distance. It was something that was very much, how do I say, as if I should have seen it. It sounded like it should have been just inside the tree line, like I should have seen whatever was knocking, but I didn't see anything. But I did see there was a sign on one of the trees there that said outhouse, and you could kind of see a little opening there, but you couldn't actually see the outhouse. And so my first thought was, okay, it must be a ranger or something fixing something over there. Because it almost resembled maybe bending down, picking up a board, putting 2 or 3 nails in, knocking the nails in, and then bending down again, picking up a board and repeating that process. Because the knocks would happen maybe 2 or 3 times, and then it would pause, and it would happen again. So it did resemble something like a ranger fixing something on an outhouse or something like that. In retrospect, I don't think that's the case at all for numerous reasons. But that's what I thought in the moment. So, like I said, these knocks are very, very loud. They're right there, but I just can't see what's going on. So anyways, this feeling is still kind of lingering that something doesn't seem right. But I turn around and I go to the fire tower. And again, the plan was to climb that and take some pictures. And I got about halfway up the ladder and realized I'm a sissy and I'm scared of heights. So I said, screw that. And I turned around and I started going back down. I get to the bottom of the stairs and another round of those knocks hit. And I don't know what it was about this last round, but it hit me a little bit harder. It made me really kind of think like something's not right here. Something's going on. I don't understand this, but something's just not right here.
Were they coming from the same location as before?
Same location the whole time. Yep. And so I just kind of stop paralyzed and I stand there and I'm just kind of staring at that direction, and the knocks had stopped. And I mean, you know how these situations work. I don't really have a great reference for time here. I want to say it was maybe 20, 30 seconds, but who knows? Could have been shorter, could have been longer. But about 20, 30 seconds, I stand there and I'm staring at that spot. And all of a sudden, something from that area, that general area, started running just inside the tree line. I'd say maybe 5 feet, if I'm guessing, inside the tree line. And it ran parallel with the tree line. So it ran, I don't know, perpendicular to my vision, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it ran inside the tree line, and I watched it run 25, 30 yards or so, and then down the mountain. And that's what really scared the shit out of me, if I'm being honest. It wasn't huge. I would say, I mean, something running that fast, just inside the tree line, I'm already standing there kind of scared. I'll be honest, it's very hard to judge the exact height, you know what I mean? But I've always guessed about 6.5 feet, 6.5 to 7 feet tall. It was definitely upright. Mm-hmm. And I could tell the color was head to toe, that classic kind of light brown to brown color. And I'll be honest, it was running so fast that I couldn't see any details. I didn't see any fingers or a face or nose or anything like that. But I know what I did see. I know the approximate height. I definitely know it was upright, and I definitely know it was super fast. I mean, this thing had to have been running, again, it's hard to guess, but I'm going to guess 30 miles an hour all day.
Wow.
No joke. I mean, I could be off, but about that, 25, 30 miles, definitely faster than a human could run.
I mean, if anybody has a good opinion on how fast humans can run, I would say it would be you. You would have a good idea.
Well, I mean, that's very kind of you, and I appreciate that. And I'll agree, just because it's very kind of you. But you know what I mean? It's one of those situations where I'm already nervous. I'm already thinking something's wrong. It's tough to gauge. You know what I mean?
Sure,
but it was
sure.
definitely, what I can tell you with 100% certainty was it was definitely faster than a human can run. There's no way it was a human doing that. And I'll be honest again, that was probably the thing that scared me the absolute most, was the speed of it. You know, the size was within a large human range, although the bulk of it was pretty bulky. I don't think someone would be that big physically. But it was the speed that really got me, because this thing was moving, and he was moving inside the tree line. It wasn't even an open field or anything like that. You know what I mean? So, So at that point, I just kind of stand there, and I'm in literal shock. I'm in that classic paralyzed state where I'm just kind of staring at the last spot that I saw it, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what happened to me. It was just very confusing, and I stood there again for maybe another 20, 30 seconds before my brain just kind of snapped out of it. And it was kind of like, what the hell was that run? And I ended up taking off running the opposite direction. And oddly, I have no idea why I decided to do this, but I actually ended up finishing my run that day. You know, the feeling of nervousness originally is not going to keep me off the mountain. I'm too dumb for that. But seeing what I saw, I would think would get me off that mountain real quick. But it didn't. I don't know. I ended up finishing that day. And oddly, that feeling after whatever ran ran by and ran down the mountain. That feeling within 10, 15 minutes kind of just went away.
Huh.
And the mountain became very peaceful. I didn't have any issues of nervousness, which doesn't make any sense even to me. And I have no idea why I reacted like that or did that. But that's what happened. I finished my run that day, and I encountered, I think that one guy. He was the only person on the mountain. So the mountain was dead that day. I don't know if any of your listeners know anything about, the Catskills in May, but it can still be, 65 at the base and 55 at the peak. And there was still a little bit of snow and ice. So, and it's a very touristy mountain. A lot of people from the city come up and hit up that mountain, and that's not the time of year that they're there. So I was definitely there in an off-peak time of the year. So there was just me and that one other guy that I didn't even hear anybody that day. So I guess it would make sense if something was going to be around, it would be around at that point. But I had no experience with any of this, so I didn't know any of that, and I had no idea what I was doing. So yeah, that was basically the encounter.
And I assume whenever you got back to your car, there wasn't any other cars in the parking lot or anything like that.
No, that car was gone. I assumed the only car that was there was that guy that I had originally saw coming down the mountain as I went up. And when I got back, no, there was not a single other car there. It was just me by myself.
If we could go back to the moment whenever you saw it and it took off running, again, you were up there training, you're a runner. What kind of comparison would you make? Like, how was the gait of its running versus that of a human?
Well, I guess that's a two-part answer for me. The first one being, if I'm being honest, like I said, I couldn't really see any detail. I don't even want to say this, but the truth is it was almost like seeing a blob squatch on a photo, but seeing a live one running, not in a photo. If that makes any sense. It was, I don't want to say it was blurry, because that's not true. There was definitely a little bit more detail than that, but I guess I couldn't necessarily tell the gait, but what I can say is one of the things that I noticed is, and I've now heard a lot of people say this, it looked like it was floating. I mean, its head, I could see movement down below where its legs would be, but its head looked perfectly flat and parallel to the ground the entire time, as if it was on a skateboard almost. I guess that would be a great comparison. I guess like it would be on a skateboard. You could see like the legs moving, but the head just did not bob up and down like a human being at all.
No bounce to it.
Not at all. Nothing. I mean, just perfectly flat the whole time.
And was it running downhill?
Originally, when for maybe 20 yards, it was flat in that section, and then it started running downhill. But I could only see when it got out of sight, from when the downhill started to when it got out of sight would have been maybe 10 yards. It wasn't very far. And at that speed, as fast as it was running, it was a second or two that I saw him going downhill. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you didn't notice any change in the movement or anything whenever it started going downhill?
No, I can't say I did, if I'm being honest.
I'm just thinking in my head, picturing like whenever a person runs downhill, let alone in the woods on the side of a mountain, they start doing that kind of stuttering, shuffling step, and their arms go out to kind of balance themselves, and they're looking down at the ground, and it's very clumsy in appearance. Did you notice anything like that, or did it just maintain a kind of a fluid motion as it ran?
Well, it's funny you say that. I never thought about that. I've had a long time to think about this, and believe me, I've thought about it a lot. I never thought about that, and the answer is no. No, it did not have that. You're right. I guess when someone starts to run downhill, they're on their heels and they slow down a bit.
Right.
This thing maintained that speed at a constant. No, it didn't. I didn't see any arms flailing. It looked exactly like it looked while it was on the flat section.
Wow.
Yeah.
Could you, obviously it was covered in hair. Any idea how long the hair was? Just a guess?
No, if I'm being honest. I would love to tell you something fun here, but no, if I'm being honest, I couldn't tell that.
No, I prefer that answer. I much more prefer whenever people just say, you know what, I don't know, as opposed to making up an answer, or trying to add detail that they didn't have. Any sounds or smells that you can associate with it?
There was never a smell. And I can't believe I forgot to mention that, but that was another interesting thing. When this thing ran, there was no sound. I've now heard this before in many accounts, and a lot of people do hear it. They hear the footsteps, and I guess some people don't. But for me, I didn't hear any sound at all. Like even when it was running through the tree area, there was no sound. And it took me a long time to even look at trees after that. I actually quit the sport of ultramarathons that day, or after that day. You go into shock, and you think a certain way on that day, but then you get home that night and maybe the next morning, and it all just kind of hits you what happened. And it made me realize how vulnerable I am as a runner out there in the woods. We're out there with no weapons, tiny little shorts and singlets, running around with our little water bottles. You know what I mean? Bigfoot aside, it could be anything. I mean, it could be a mountain lion, it could be a bear, and we are defenseless out there as trail runners, and it kind of really hit me. So I'm going too far into this. I apologize, but the point is, I quit the sport. I stopped with ultramarathons. I still run, but I stick to the roads.
Have you ever been there before? Was that like your first time to that particular trail?
Yes, I had been to there's a ski resort there on the opposite side that I had run up that day. So I had been there to ski before, but I had never been there on the trails, and I certainly hadn't been on that back trail. No. That was my first time there for that.
And that feeling of dread and something not being right that you felt whenever you kind of entered the woods that day, had you ever felt that any other time?
For the most part, no, never. There was one other time that things kind of felt weird in the Adirondacks one time, and that never amounted to anything. I didn't have any sort of encounter, but I did kind of have that feeling one other time. But for the most part, no. I always felt very comfortable in the woods by myself. I never really had that feeling. For anything really, not even just ultramarathon or running. I had never really had that feeling before, ever.
So now that you've had all this time to process it, and I'm sure think of it obsessively, as most people do whenever they've had an encounter.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on what you encountered that day? I mean, what do you think was going on? Do you think it was watching you or following you? Do you think you just kind of got the drop on it? What do you think happened?
Well, of course, it is just a theory. I really have no idea, but you just nailed on the head. It does become an obsession. And so I found every Bigfoot podcast I could possibly find and listened to everything I can possibly listen to try to learn. And so I'd heard this before, and I kind of tried to make some connections, and I think it might be possible that, well, it's reported anyways a lot of times that they will oftentimes follow people who are solo and or dogs and women seem to be attracted to. And the guy coming down looked Native American, maybe. He had a longer ponytail. I'm not saying he looked feminine in any way, shape, or form, but to a Bigfoot, possibly. I don't know, but he could have looked like, to a Bigfoot, a female with a dog. And I almost wonder if this thing was actually following him. And then as we passed each other, either curiosity hit for it, and it was thinking, I can't imagine Bigfoot sees a lot of runners in the woods, right? They're going to see a lot of hunters. They're going to see a lot of hikers probably, but I can't imagine they see a lot of, skinny people with tiny shorts on, water bottles hanging everywhere, running through the woods. You know what I mean? It was probably a little bit of a shock to it, possibly. And so I don't know if it was curiosity, but anyways, I was theorizing that it was possible it was actually following him. And then as we passed each other, it decided to follow me up because I didn't have the feeling of dread until I had passed him, a few minutes after 5-10 minutes, whatever, after I'd passed him. It wasn't until then. And in retrospect, looking back too, and this could be absolutely nothing, I might just be making this up, but when we'd pass each other and I'd said hello, I know you're very aware of this. Most people are very friendly on the trails. You say hello, they're going to say hello, how's your day, whatever.
Right.
And he wasn't at all. And that could just be his personality. Who knows? I have no idea. But he gave me a side look almost. I said hello. I was like, hey, how you doing? And he didn't respond at all. He kind of gave me a side look as if he acknowledged that I said something to him, but he didn't actually say anything back. And in retrospect, I guess it's possible that his facial expression could have been that he almost looked concerned. Mm-hmm. but like he wasn't going to say anything. Like, hey, I keep hearing something following me out. But you know, at the risk of sounding crazy, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna look at you and keep walking and get the hell out of here. You know?
Yeah.
And again, I could be totally making all this up. I have no idea, but it's just some things that went through my mind, and yeah. So I wonder if it was following him, and then it made the transition to following me once it saw me going up, and it followed me from there. But I didn't hear anything. You know, when I continued up the trail and then got to the T and then took the right. It wasn't until I got to that cabin that I heard the first thing, which would have been those knocks. And interestingly, I realized in retrospect that, how do I say this? Where I had taken the second right to turn into that open area where the cabin was, that was basically the corner of the woods there, where I started hearing the knocks. So I guess what I'm saying is, those knocks would have been within 20 feet roughly of where I had just ran. And in retrospect, I saw nothing. You know, I guess after I started thinking about it, it's like, well, if it was a ranger, you would think you would see, you know, side by side, a four-wheeler, some lumber. You'd hear him with a walkie-talkie, maybe talking to someone else, a radio. You know what I mean? You think there'd be some sort of sign of a human. And I had realized later on that there wasn't anything at all. These knocks seemed to be coming from just the trees, and that was it. So yeah, that's what I theorized might have happened. I saw him, was following him, and then it turned around and started following me instead.
It's just speculation, like you're saying. We have no way of knowing, but I think, I think that's a really strong theory that you formed, especially with the fact that the guy had a dog with him. That would definitely be something that would grab a Bigfoot's interest. And you running, I mean, you're right. I doubt they see a lot of people running through the woods, and just instinctively something running is going to get something else's attention out in the wilderness. You know, running usually means something is chasing you or you're chasing after something, and it would serve something else a great deal to be aware of what was going on if something was just running through their territory. The knocks and everything like that, you know. And again, I know some people are going to be listening and think, you know, like, well, you don't know that. And you're right, we don't. But a common belief amongst researchers is that in certain territories, there will be what we call a sentry, kind of a lookout, keeping guard, keeping watch in an area, and letting the others know if there's a human in the area. And it kind of sounds like that might be what you ran into up there.
I thought that as well. Yeah, I would agree with you. That was kind of the impression I got. Yeah, I'm not really too sure why, but you're right. I felt the same way because, I mean, like I said, the knocks were very blatant. There was no doubt it wasn't some knock that was a half mile off or 3/4 mile off, that it was off in the distance. It's like, well, I guess it could have been anything. Like I said, it was within 20, 25 yards. I mean, it maybe even less. It was definitely close enough that it sounded like I should have seen somebody just inside the tree line with a hammer banging on something. And it was what got me, it was very rhythmic too. You know, it was slow and rhythmic. It was not fast at all like a woodpecker. It was just bang, bang, bang. It was just very slow and rhythmic. And then it would pause and then it would do it again. It sounded nothing like a woodpecker at all, you know. But the point being is, you're right. I had wondered that myself, that it could have been a lookout, and it was clearly trying to communicate something to someone or something else. I don't know why else it would do it, and then it would just stop and then take off down the hill, and then I didn't hear a single knock after that. The rest of the day, I ended up being on the mountain and I can only confirm this and remember this because it was on Strava. I had it on Strava that day. I was on the mountain for that day for almost 5 hours. I never heard a knock after that, And I ended up going down the other side of the mountain, coming back up and passing the area that I had, all this happened to go back down to my car. So I never heard a knock the whole rest of the day. I never saw another person, no, a four-wheeler side by side. I never saw anybody or anything else there. The knocks happened. I saw this thing run down the mountain. The knocks went away. I never heard it again.
No more feelings of dread or anything after that. You said the entire feeling kind of lifted and dissipated, and everything went back to normal, like a normal day.
Exactly right, which doesn't make any sense. And hearing the story, saying it out loud doesn't make any sense to me. I even for myself, not even just for listeners listening to me, even for myself, I don't understand that behavior. I normally, if something scares me like that, I'm done. That's it. I'm done for the day. I have no idea why I even decided to continue on. And I had a great day. It ended up being wonderful after that. And I don't have an explanation for that either. The feeling lasted, half hour or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ran, and the feelings ran with it. And it just kind of, well, I guess it was a shock at that point. So there's still a feeling of shock and what the hell just happened, I guess, for another 15, 20 minutes. But as I started continuing down the other side of the mountain, it kind of slowly lifted away, and then it just completely went away, and I never felt that again.
I think that's kind of, maybe normal's not the right word, but a common reaction in situations like that. Whenever a person goes through shock, their brain tends to kind of compensate for that, and they just go about their normal routine, even whenever they shouldn't. Oftentimes, like, take for instance, like if a person's going to the grocery store and they get into a really bad car accident before they get to the store, oftentimes they'll just be like, oh, well, I need to get to the store. I need to pick up my groceries. That it's just part of the process. So it might be something like that. Something clearly happened to cause you to quit doing something that you were passionate about like that.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried going back there or getting out there or anything, getting back on the horse, so to speak?
Not really. Like I said, there's other ways to do endurance sports. I picked the trails. I picked the bike back up a little bit and continued that on. I didn't go near, like I said, I didn't go near trees at all. I didn't even want to drive down a wooded road, for quite some time. And I did go back to Hunter Mountain, to that exact spot, almost a year later on the dot. But I went very strategically. I went on in like July when it was very touristy. I made sure it was a weekend day. I went at noon when I knew there was going to be a ton of, the opposite of what most people like. I went when I knew there was going to be a ton of people there. And I went with my girlfriend, and we went up, and I checked the spot out, and there was, a volunteer, I don't know if ranger is the right word, whatever, we'll just say that, a volunteer ranger or whatever that was in the cabin there. And I asked him, I said, just out of curiosity, I said, have you guys ever experienced anything weird up here? And of course, he gave the typical answer. And I was very naive at this point. I thought someone would maybe be a little more honest. And I understand now that even if they know something, they're typically not going to say something, But I didn't know that then. So I asked him, "Have you ever seen?" No. And I said, well, listen, I'm not crazy, I promise. I said, but here's my story. I said, this is what happened to me a year ago here. And, oh, well, it was probably a bear. I said, well, this thing was about 6.5 feet tall. Well, yeah, bears will stand up on their hind legs. Yes.
And run downhill?
Well, that's what I said. But do they sprint on their hind legs? Well, they can run pretty fast, 30 miles an hour. And I said, but on their hind legs. And when I said that, he finally was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what you saw. And he just kind of smiled. And it was a no. Okay, I'm not going. That's when I learned. Okay, I'm not going to get anywhere with this. So to answer your question, yeah, I did go back a year later, and I checked out that exact spot, and there is no, the exact spot where it ran. I saw it running, and it just was. There was no trail there at all. I didn't know if there might be, how to say this. It was an open area, open clearing area. Obviously, it was maintained, so they're going to cut down some trees, and I didn't know if maybe there was like a little ranger access trail kind of on the outside that maybe they use for whatever they're doing. But no, there wasn't. There was no trail whatsoever there. It was just trees. So this thing ran through these trees without making a sound in that makes no sense to me and baffles me, and I have no explanation for that. But that happened.
It's kind of interesting. Just this past Monday, I was talking to somebody else. I was talking about, I don't even know what to call it, man. An encounter, I guess. I mean, call it what you will. I was out in the woods looking for Bigfoot, and it was at nighttime. Some other stuff was going on. So we were actually at camp. We weren't technically out in the woods looking for Bigfoot at that moment. But I feel it's necessary to mention that. And I had walked away in one direction from everybody else. I'm on a paved road in the campgrounds or whatever. And I didn't have a flashlight. I had no light with me at all. And I got pretty far away from camp, and it kind of dawned on me for a second, like, whoa, you should probably, get back to camp. You don't have a light or anything.
Sure.
And the road that I was walking back on, there's a trail that intersects it. And on this trail, I heard footfalls, very rapid, coming towards the road. And the trail basically intersected the road about 20 feet from where I was standing.
Oh boy.
And I thought it was a person. I mean, it sounded like a person running. I'm certainly not expecting a Bigfoot or anything like that. And this thing, and that's all I can describe it as, crosses the road, running, full speed, crazy fast. And it was just like, boom, boom, and it's across the road entirely. Now, the road's not like a double lane road like you normally drive on. It's a camp road, so it's about 1.5 car widths.
Sure.
But this thing immediately, hits the other side of the road, hits the trail. It's going down the trail. I run over there, look down the trail, and I don't see anything. There's no movement, nothing. The leaves aren't even moving. Now, whenever it came out of the trail at the road, I could see like the underbrush and stuff moving as it ran by it. But whenever it was hitting the road, I didn't hear anything. And this thing, I don't know if it was just because of how fast it was moving, but all I can say is it looked like a tall, about 6.5 feet tall, like shadow, just a black blur, just a dark blur. I couldn't make out any details. I've even at times, whenever I've talked to people, I've compared it to like how people describe like a shadow person, in the paranormal world.
Sure.
It wasn't see-through or anything, but I just couldn't see any details. And it was just like this blur running across the road and then just vanishes. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it or anything. And that just immediately popped in my head whenever you were describing what you saw that day. Same sort of thing. Definitely spooky, definitely weird for sure. I don't know how something that large moving at that rate of speed can do it silently.
Yeah, it's very good.
Just going with your gut, did any of it feel paranormal to you?
I don't think so. I've had a couple people bring up in the past about that original feeling that I had that, rather, whatever kept repeating in my head, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be here. They brought up the mind speak stuff that goes on with Bigfoot, I suppose. And I honestly, I don't have an answer for that. I wouldn't know what mind speak feels like anyways, or sounds like anyways, because I have no reference for this. But I have always leaned towards no, that I almost, when I hear other people describe this mind speak, they say it in a way that it sounds like it's someone or something else's voice. And I didn't necessarily feel that way. It was almost more like an intuition. Yeah. But something did keep repeating in my mind over and over, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be here. But I guess I don't know either way, but it felt more like it was my own intuition telling me this. I guess to answer your question, no, except, I don't know. I guess if I'm open to ideas. When you just described the incident that you had, you use words that I haven't before that are very accurate to my scenario as well. You're right. It was Blur is strong, maybe for my scenario.
Yeah.
But I guess I would lean more towards that. It was a little more descriptive than blur, but yeah, I guess it was more blur than detailed, I guess, if I really think about it.
I mean, yours also happened in broad daylight, and mine was in pitch darkness. So there is that. And I mean, I just couldn't make out any details. It just looked like, a black humanoid figure that was definitely tall. The one that I saw that night, whatever it was, also appeared very skinny, though. And you said that yours had a lot of bulk to it, or more so than a person.
Correct. Yeah.
Whenever you were looking at it, the lack of detail that you saw, do you attribute that to just the state of mind you were in, or the speed that it was moving, or just no explanation?
Yeah, I'm open to all suggestions, but I've always attributed it to the speed.
Yeah.
The speed and the fact that it was moving through trees, right? So I didn't see it at a constant. It was in total, it was 40, 50. Again, I'm not very good at distance, but maybe 40, 50 yards. So I saw enough of it, and it's not super thick underbrush. So it's not as though, I could only see from the neck up for 10 yards before I went past a bunch of trees. I was able to see it for 40 or 50 yards. It was just kind of sporadic as it went past trees.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I've never in my mind felt like it was a paranormal experience, to answer your question. But I'm open to that, and certainly it could have been. And the blurriness, I guess, would explain something like that. So I certainly think it's possible, but I've never really thought that before.
I spent, about 10 years out in the woods looking for these things, and I never had an encounter with them that I thought was them, at least, that I felt was paranormal at all. But then I've talked to people, that I completely believe that, claim they had a paranormal experience with these things. And that's kind of part of the mystery. It definitely adds to it.
I was just saying, I agree with you that I 100% do believe in the paranormal part of Bigfoot. There's just too many people talking about the orbs and lights and being associated with this and that. And there's just too much. There's too many people talking about the same thing that seems to be very paranormal related. So, I think, in my humble opinion, that is not an expert, and I really have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. But I think we're dealing with numerous things here. I'm not in the specifically flesh and blood, nor specifically paranormal. I kind of think we're dealing with a little bit of both, or a lot of bit of both, and then what direction do you go there? I have no idea. But I'm with you. I do believe in the paranormal side of this stuff. I just don't know if mine was.
So you reached out to me asking if I knew anybody in the area. Does that mean that this is something that you want to pursue? Are you going out looking for these things now?
Absolutely not. No, what it was you had a guy in your well, I'm terrible with this. I don't remember the details. I just remember the story. But it was a guy who became a Buddhist, and
right.
He was on the show, and he was talking about how he interacts with them all the time because of his Buddhism. And he had mentioned that he was doing this around the Binghamton, New York area, which is where I'm from. So I had reached out to ask if you were willing to connect me with him, so I just wanted to meet the guy, talk to him, and kind of hear his stories. And you go online, and thank God for social media, and thank God for you guys and your podcast. It really is a therapy. And I actually want to take the opportunity to thank you very much for what you do, because it really is such a therapy for everybody to be able to come on and talk about their incident.
I really appreciate that. It's as much therapy for me as it is for anybody else.
Sure.
It helps me deal with, what I've seen and the things I've experienced. And,
sure.
I've become probably more obsessed with it than most of the people I talk to on the show.
Sure.
And each one of them helps, like just talking to you, that helps me with that incident that I was just speaking about. 'Cause that's something that, it's, especially as someone who used to go out and investigate these things, you got to be careful with the things you say. And that was one of those things where, like, it was really hard to talk about because people start kind of looking at you side-eyed, like, oh, well, I guess maybe you're starting to see things out there. Maybe you should, take a step back or something. But that's what I experienced. And that's all I can do is just deliver the truth. And that's what it was. I don't understand it. I don't have an explanation, but that's what it was.
Yeah, I agree. I don't do that. I have no interest in going out and trying to find these things, but I do make it a habit, or I have made it a habit rather, to anybody that I meet or that I know that is a hunter or a hiker or just spends a lot of time in the woods, I'll ask them. And I don't, to be honest, I'm at a point in my life, I don't care what they think. I really honestly don't. So I'll ask them, have you ever experienced anything weird? And it's 50-50, really, as far as their initial reaction. Most people kind of look at, or half the people look at you like you're weird, and the other half are, no, not really. But what's interesting is, regardless of how they look at me, more times than not, I get the same answer initially. No, not really. But there was this one time, and then they go on to tell me a story that, of course, I can't say was Bigfoot, but does have a lot of similarities to a lot of other stories that would that would resemble Bigfoot, you know what I mean? Or at least something weird and something different and something out there. I would say more times than not, I do get people that, even if they're not a believer in Bigfoot at all, they do have some sort of odd story, very odd story in the woods.
It's kind of strange how those odd stories contain a lot of the same details that are often associated with Bigfoot that people don't even realize.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. You worded it a lot better than I did. But in a streamlined way, yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
I'm good at repeating the exact thing that someone just said. So,
well done.
Well, yeah, man. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story like that. Mr. Kang, I believe it was, if he happens to be listening, I've lost your contact information. Ryan's trying to get a hold of you, man. So if you hear this, hit me up and I'll put you guys in touch.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. And again, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm just repeating myself, but it's a therapy, man. And it helps so much to talk to somebody about it. And for those listeners that may have an encounter, I highly encourage you to reach out to somebody, Matt or whoever, because it really is such a weight lift off your shoulder just being able to talk about it. So no, thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And if you do want to reach out to me with your story of a Bigfoot encounter or something else you've experienced, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, merchandise, a contact form that reaches me directly, past episodes, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.